The recruitment hall smelled like fear and cleaning solution. Sergeant Kravix stood at the front of the assembly room, all 7 feet of scaled muscle and barely contained rage. His species, the Thoraxians, had been bred for war across 6 generations. They didn't ask questions. They didn't hesitate. They certainly didn't tolerate weakness. "Listen up, you sorry collection of biological accidents." His voice rattled the metal supports overhead. "In 3 rotations, we ship out to Frontier Station Omega. The Vrax swarm has been spotted 12 sectors away and closing fast. High Command needs bodies. Warm, cold, gaseous, doesn't matter. If you can hold a weapon, you're getting drafted." I stood in the back row, trying to make my 4 arms look less conspicuous. "My name is Telek, and I'm what you'd call a support specialist. I fix things. Communications arrays, life support systems, broken morale, that sort of thing. I'm not a fighter. Nobody in my family has ever been a fighter. My species, the Quellians, we're thinkers, builders, survivors, by virtue of being too useful to exterminate." The human stood 3 positions to my left. At first, I didn't even notice him. Humans were still relatively new to the Galactic Coalition. Maybe 30 cycles since first contact. They were short by most standards, lacked natural weapons, had embarrassingly thin skin, and frankly, nobody quite knew what to do with them. They'd passed the basic intelligence tests, barely, and had been granted provisional membership. Mostly, they stayed on their own planets, tinkering with primitive faster-than-light engines and arguing among themselves. This one looked exactly like you'd expect. Brown hair cropped close to his skull, medium build, wearing the standard gray recruit uniform that somehow looked more rumpled on him than on anyone else. His identification tag read, Marcus Webb. Kravix continued his speech, mandibles clicking with each emphasized word. "The Vrax don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They consume everything in their path and turn it into more of themselves. Entire colonies have gone dark. Entire species have been rendered extinct. They are the single greatest threat to civilized life in this galaxy." A collective shudder ran through the assembled recruits. I'd seen the classified footage that leaked 6 months ago. The Vrax looked like a nightmare designed by committee. Insectoid bodies the size of ground transports, acid that could melt through battle armor in seconds, and a hive intelligence that made them terrifyingly coordinated. They didn't feel pain. They didn't feel anything except hunger. "Now!" Kravix's voice dropped to something almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. "High Command has a special assignment. Needs volunteers. There's a research outpost on Kelvan Prime. 3 scientists, good people, doing important work on Vrax biology, trying to find a weakness we can exploit. Problem is, the swarm changed direction 2 days ago. New trajectory puts them at Kelvan Prime in 72 hours. He paused, letting that sink in. The scientists refuse to evacuate. Say they're close to a breakthrough. Say they need just a little more time. Command wants someone to go down there, guard the facility, and when things go bad, make sure the research data gets transmitted back to Fleet Headquarters before the Vrax overrun the position. The room had gone absolutely silent. You could have heard a molecule vibrate. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is a suicide mission. The Vrax will come. You will be outnumbered approximately 10,000 to 1. Standard combat doctrine says you hold as long as possible, transmit the data, then activate the facility's self-destruct to deny the enemy any intelligence. You will not be extracted. You will not survive. But you might, just might, save a few billion lives if those scientists find what they're looking for. Kravix's eyes swept across the crowd. I need 1 volunteer. Just 1. Someone stupid enough or brave enough to face the beast alone. Nobody moved. I certainly wasn't moving. I had 2 mates back home and a juvenile offspring who still couldn't properly operate his feeding tentacles. Support specialist, remember? I fixed things from a safe distance. To my left, a Draxon trooper who looked like he could bench press a shuttle suddenly found the floor fascinating. To my right, a pair of synth warriors, members of a species that literally worshipped combat, both took a subtle step backwards. The silence stretched. Seconds became uncomfortable. Uncomfortable became excruciating. Then, movement. The human raised his hand. Not dramatically, not with any particular flourish. Just up it went, like he was asking a question in some provincial learning center. His expression remained neutral, maybe even slightly bored. Kravix's head swiveled so fast I heard his neck vertebrae crack. You. State your name and species. Marcus Webb. Human. Formerly corporal in the Earth Military Coalition, Infantry Division, 3 tours in the African conflict zones before we went off-world. His voice had a strange quality. Calm. Too calm. Like he was discussing lunch options. You understand what I just described, human? This isn't guard duty at some peaceful outpost. This is certain death against overwhelming odds. Marcus shrugged. Actually shrugged. Yeah, I got it. 72 hours, then bug problems. Sounds like Tuesday. A nervous laugh rippled through some of the recruits, quickly suppressed. Kravix didn't look amused. You think this is funny, Webb? No, sir. I think it's necessary. You need someone to buy time for those scientists. I can do that. Kravix moved closer, looming over the human. From my angle, the size difference was comical. The sergeant could have used Marcus as a toothpick. I've seen your file. You've been in exactly 3 minor skirmishes since joining coalition forces. You've never even seen a Vrax in person. True, on both counts. Marcus maintained eye contact, which was either incredibly brave or catastrophically stupid. Possibly both. But I've fought things that wanted to kill me before. I've held positions against bad odds before. And respectfully, sir, nobody else seems eager to volunteer. That hung in the air like a bad smell. Kravix stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to address the room. Anyone else? Anyone want to show up this scrawny little primate? More silence. The Draxon trooper actually took another step back. Fine. Kravix gestured sharply. Webb, you just volunteered for the shortest assignment in military history. Report to Launch Bay 7 in 2 hours. Dismissed. The assembly broke up quickly, recruits practically fleeing to their various duties. I found myself walking in the same direction as Marcus, purely by coincidence of barrack assignments. Couldn't help myself. That was either the bravest thing I've ever witnessed or the dumbest. He glanced at me, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Why not both? You're going to die. You understand that, right? The Vrax are not some theoretical threat. They're apocalypse-level predators. Probably. He said it so casually, like we were discussing weather patterns. But those scientists might actually find something useful, might save lives. Someone's got to give them the time to work. We walked past a viewing port. The planet below, designation GC 447, rotated slowly. Beautiful swirls of blue and green, utterly peaceful from this distance. Kelvan Prime was 3 jumps away, at the edge of explored space. No beautiful colors there, just gray rock and research bunkers. Can I ask you something? I kept pace, my 4 arms gesturing in what I hoped was a non-threatening manner. Why? Why volunteer? You could have stayed quiet like everyone else. Marcus stopped walking, turned to face me directly. His eyes, I noticed, were this odd brown color, like processed soil. Human eyes were strange, flat, forward-facing. but somehow they conveyed depths that shouldn't be possible. Where I come from, we've got this old saying, evil triumphs when good people do nothing. Maybe it sounds corny. Maybe it is corny. But I've seen what happens when everyone decides something isn't their problem. Communities fall apart, nations collapse, people suffer who didn't need to suffer. He resumed walking. Plus, I'm really good at being difficult to kill. Might as well put that skill to use. 2 hours later, I found myself at Launch Bay 7. I had no good reason to be there. My shift didn't start for another 6 hours, but something compelled me to watch. Marcus stood next to a small transport vessel, checking equipment with methodical efficiency. He'd been issued a standard coalition battle suit, reinforced polymer plating over pressure-sealed fabric, along with a pulse rifle and enough ammunition to hold off a small battalion. For about 10 minutes, a technician, some young plebeian with nervous antenna twitches, was running through the pre-flight checklist. Atmospheric processor is green. Food synthesizer is stocked for 2 weeks, though I don't think— Thanks! Marcus cut him off gently. Appreciate the thorough work. Kravix appeared from somewhere, moving with that predatory grace his species was known for. He carried a small metal case. Webb. Last chance to back out. No shame in self-preservation. With respect, sir, we both know that's a lie, but I appreciate the sentiment. The sergeant's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. He opened the case, revealing a small data chip. This contains everything we know about Vrax physiology, combat patterns, weakness theories. Won't help much, but it's better than nothing. The scientists on Kelvan Prime have the same information, along with live specimens they've been studying. Marcus took the chip, slotted it into his suit's interface. Port. Live specimens? They've captured Vrax? 3 drones. Juvenile. Kept in containment fields. Don't worry. The containment is rated for— Yeah, I'm sure it's fine. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Murphy's Law and all that. Murphy's what? Human thing. Basically, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong at the worst possible moment. Kravix made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a growl. Your species has a philosophy about failure? We've got philosophies about everything. Most of them involve assuming the universe is out to get us and planning accordingly. I watched this exchange, fascinated despite myself. The human showed no signs of fear, no trembling, no elevated respiration, nothing. Either he had incredible emotional control, or his species was even stranger than the xenobiologists thought. The transport was ready. Marcus climbed aboard, settled into the pilot's seat, and ran through the startup sequence. The engines hummed to life, a low thrumming that vibrated through the deck plating. Kravix stepped back, gave a formal salute. Marcus returned it, then the transport doors sealed shut. I stayed and watched through the bay windows as the small vessel detached from its moorings, pivoted gracefully, and shot out into the black. 3 jumps away. 72 hours until the swarm arrived. 1 human against 10,000 Vrax. He's dead. Kravix stood beside me now, his earlier aggression drained away, replaced by something quieter. Sadness, maybe. Brave, but dead. Maybe. I didn't know why I felt the need to defend someone I'd barely spoken to. Humans are unpredictable. The initial contact reports mentioned that they don't follow standard behavioral models. Unpredictable doesn't stop acid from melting flesh. Unpredictable doesn't reload a rifle when you're being swarmed by monsters. He turned away. But I respect the courage. Small mercies. The end should be quick once the Vrax breach the facility. 3 days passed. I threw myself into work, trying not to think about Marcus Webb standing alone on a dead rock at the edge of nowhere, waiting for an army of biological nightmares to tear him apart. I recalibrated sensor arrays, updated communication protocols, and generally made myself useful. On the second day, my supervisor, a gruff Tholian named Vrax, mentioned that the listening posts near Kelvan Prime had picked up increased Vrax biosignatures. The swarm was ahead of schedule, arriving in approximately 18 hours instead of the projected timeline. On the third day, at hour 68 of the countdown, I was off duty in the recreation area when the emergency broadcast activated. Every screen in the facility lit up simultaneously. Command priority override. The image showed Admiral Thex, a weathered Corthian with more battle scars than scales, looking directly at the camera. All personnel, this is a fleet-wide announcement. At 0600 hours this morning, we received a transmission from Research Outpost Kelvan Prime. My heart stopped beating in sequence. The Vrax swarm arrived 16 hours ahead of projections. Initial contact occurred at 0400. We have confirmed visual on approximately 12,000 Vrax units, including warriors, drones, and 3 command-class organisms. The facility was equipped with automated defenses, but these were overwhelmed within the first 30 minutes of engagement. This was it. The confirmation that Marcus Webb died exactly as predicted, buried under a tide of alien monsters. However, the Admiral's expression shifted to something I couldn't quite identify. Confusion? Disbelief? The facility is still operational. The human volunteer, Corporal Marcus Webb, is still alive and actively defending the position. Furthermore, the scientific team reports they are approximately 6 hours from completing their research, having made a significant breakthrough in identifying a viral agent that may compromise Vrax neural coordination. The recreation area erupted in shocked conversation. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was hearing. We are dispatching a rapid response fleet to Kelvan Prime, but given the distance and jump calculations, arrival time is estimated at 14 hours. Command is authorizing this broadcast to keep all personnel informed. We will provide updates as the situation develops. That is all. The screen went dark. 14 hours. Marcus had to survive 14 more hours against 12,000 Vrax. With automated defenses already destroyed, it was impossible. But he was still alive right now, which was already impossible. I abandoned my recreation plans and headed straight for the Command Intelligence Center. Technically, support specialists didn't have clearance for live tactical feeds, but I'd done enough favors for enough people that the security officer, a sleepy-eyed Rendix named Call, let me slip in the back. The main display showed a tactical overview of Kelvan Prime. Dozens of red hostile markers surrounding a single green friendly signal. Camera feeds from the facility's external sensors showed chaos. The camera feeds painted a picture that defied logic. The research facility sat in a narrow canyon, gray walls rising on 3 sides like ancient guardians. Smart defensive position, limiting approach vectors. But smart only goes so far when you're drowning in enemies. Vrax bodies littered the ground in heaps. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, piled against the facility's outer walls like some grotesque sculpture. The automated turrets had done their job before ammunition ran dry, leaving twisted metal barrels pointing uselessly at the sky. But the killing hadn't stopped. Marcus Webb moved through the carnage like a force of nature, having a particularly bad day. He'd abandoned the pulse rifle hours ago, switched to something that looked jury-rigged from facility components and pure spite. Some kind of plasma cutter welded to a fuel cell, spraying superheated death in wide arcs. When that overheated, he dropped it and picked up a Vrax limb, using the creature's own serrated appendage as a club. Is he actually winning? Call leaned forward, antenna quivering with disbelief. Winning is a strong word. I watched Marcus dodge a Vrax warrior's strike, roll under its guard, and drive an explosive charge directly into its thorax segment. The detonation sent chitin fragments spraying across 3 other attackers. Surviving! He's surviving! The audio feed crackled to life. Heavy breathing, the wet sounds of combat, and then Marcus's voice, strained but somehow still containing that bizarre humor. Day 3 of Bug Extermination Service. Would not recommend. 1-star review. Facilities manager keeps sending more clients than agreed upon in original contract. One of the scientists responded, a female voice tight with stress. Her name was Dr. Yana, a Plexian neurobiologist. Mr. Webb, we're reading structural damage to the east wall. Can you reinforce? East wall. Copy. Bit busy at the moment, Doc. Give me 30 seconds. 30 seconds. He said it like he was asking someone to wait while he finished a beverage. The camera angle switched to internal facility feeds. The 3 scientists worked frantically in a sealed laboratory, surrounded by data screens and equipment I couldn't begin to identify. In a corner of the room, 3 containment cells held the juvenile Vrax specimens, each one the size of a large predator, claws scraping uselessly against energy barriers. Dr. Yana looked exhausted. Her 2 colleagues, a Thrim named Vec and another human called Jackson, looked worse. But their hands never stopped moving, processing samples, running calculations, arguing about molecular structures. The viral agent is responding exactly as predicted, Vec announced, his crystalline voice crackling with excitement. If we can synthesize enough, introduce it to the swarm's feeding patterns, we'll have a weapon that could save the entire sector, Jackson finished. He was older than Marcus, gray hair and wrinkled skin that marked significant age for his species. But we need stable conditions for another 5 hours minimum. The synthesis process can't be rushed without risking contamination. Outside, Marcus had reached the damaged east wall. A Vrax warrior, one of the larger variants, was systematically tearing through the reinforced plating. Each strike of its massive forelimbs peeled away chunks of metal like paper. Marcus didn't hesitate. He sprinted directly at it, ducked under a swing that would have decapitated most species, and jammed something into the gap between its head and torso sections. Then he ran. The explosion wasn't large, but it was precisely placed. The warrior's head separated from its body in a spray of acidic blood, which immediately began eating through the surrounding ground. East wall temporarily secured, Doc. But we've got a problem. I'm seeing movement patterns changing. The swarm's adapting, sending smaller units to probe for weak points while the big ones keep me busy. Can you hold? Dr. Yana's voice shook slightly. A pause. The sound of something heavy hitting something else heavy. A grunt of pain. Ask me again in an hour. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I watched, unable to look away, as Marcus Webb fought a battle that should have ended in the first 5 minutes. He used everything available. Facility fire suppression systems became improvised flame weapons. Maintenance tunnels became ambush points. He collapsed part of the canyon wall to create a choke point, funneling the Vrax into killing zones where he'd planted every remaining explosive. He was injured. Even through the camera feeds, I could see it. His movements slowed incrementally. A limp favored his left side. At one point, he sealed a breach in his suit with emergency foam, the material hardening instantly, but leaving that entire arm compromised. The Vrax kept coming. Command-class organisms appeared, larger than the warriors, with intelligence gleaming in their compound eyes. They coordinated attacks, sacrificed drones to create openings, adapted to Marcus's tactics with terrifying speed. In the recreation area, word had spread. Dozens of personnel crowded around screens, watching this impossible last stand. Even Sergeant Kravix stood at the back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "He can't keep this up," someone muttered. A synth warrior, one of the same ones who'd backed away during the initial recruitment. No one can sustain that level of combat intensity. But Marcus did. Hour 5 arrived. The facility's power systems were failing. Emergency lighting, casting everything in red shadow. Marcus fought in near darkness, using thermal sensors and pure instinct to track targets. Dr. Yana's voice came through, barely controlled panic finally breaking through her professional calm. "Marcus, we have a critical problem. The containment fields on the specimen cells are losing integrity. Power fluctuations from battle damage. If they fail, how long until your research is done?" 47 minutes. We're in the final synthesis stage. Then patch emergency power to the lab and those containment cells. Strip it from everywhere else, if you have to. That will shut down the remaining defensive systems. Environmental controls, everything. Yeah, well, the defensive systems are already scrap metal, and I've been holding my breath for 3 days anyway. Do it. The scientists complied. On screen, the facility went almost completely dark. Only the laboratory remained illuminated, a single bright point in the encroaching shadow. Marcus continued fighting in the blackness. The tactical display showed his position moving, engaging, retreating. A green dot surrounded by an ocean of red. But the red markers were decreasing. Slowly, impossibly, the numbers dropped. 12,000 became 11,000. 10,000. 9. "He's killed 3,000 Vrax." Call's voice was barely a whisper. "By himself? That's statistically impossible." "Humans don't care much about statistics." Kravix spoke for the first time, his tone thoughtful. "I looked up their military history after Webb volunteered. They've been fighting themselves for their entire recorded existence. Wars lasting years, decades, sometimes centuries. They've developed more ways to kill than any species in the database. It's not pretty, but it's effective." Hour 6 approached. Marcus was down to improvised weapons now. A broken pipe. A chunk of Vrax carapace sharpened to an edge. At one point, he strangled a drone with its own severed antenna, which should have been darkly funny if it wasn't so horrifying. His breathing over the audio feed sounded like damaged machinery. Ragged, wet, possibly bleeding internally. "Doc." His voice barely came through. "Status?" 2 minutes. Marcus, 2 minutes, and we have it. The synthesis is complete. We're packaging the data now. Good, that's good. Because I'm about out of tricks here. The tactical display showed why. The remaining Vrax, maybe 6,000 strong, had stopped their piecemeal attacks. They were massing, consolidating, preparing for one final, overwhelming push. The command-class organisms had learned. No more feeding troops into the meat grinder. Just gather everything and crash through in a single irresistible wave. Marcus saw it too. He retreated to the laboratory entrance, sealed the reinforced door behind him, and for the first time in 6 hours, stopped moving. He stood in the corridor, back against the wall, chest heaving. His armor was destroyed, hanging in strips. Blood, his own and Vrax ichor, covered every surface. The weapon in his hand, some kind of maintenance tool never designed for combat, trembled slightly. 30 seconds, Dr. Yana announced. Transmitting now. Outside, the Vrax struck the facility like a tidal wave. The entire structure shuddered. Metal screamed. Stone cracked. Transmission complete! Jackson's voice rang with triumph. Fleet headquarters confirms receipt. They have everything. The viral agent. The synthesis process. Deployment strategies. Everything. The facility shook again, harder. Somewhere deep in the structure, support beams gave way with sounds like thunder. Dr. Yana appeared in the corridor, Vec and Jackson behind her. All three looked at Marcus with expressions I couldn't quite parse. Gratitude? Awe? Horror at what they'd witnessed? Self-destruct is armed, Vex said quietly. 30 seconds. Marcus nodded slowly. He looked at each of them, seemed about to say something, then just smiled. Tired. Genuine. Human. Get to the escape pods. Make sure this wasn't for nothing. They ran. Marcus stayed. He stood in that corridor, weapon held loosely, and waited. They poured through the gap, an unstoppable flood of rage and hunger and biological imperative. Marcus raised his weapon. Then the feed cut to static. The recreation area went silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 15 seconds later, the tactical display showed a bright flash where Kelvan Prime's research facility used to exist. The self-destruct had been rated to vaporize a 3-kilometer radius. Nothing survived. Not the facility, not the research, not the Vrax, not Marcus Webb. The remaining swarm units, deprived of their target and disoriented by the loss of their command class leaders, scattered. Long-range sensors showed them breaking into smaller groups, fleeing back toward the outer rim territories. Admiral Thex's face appeared on screens again. He looked older than before, worn down by weight of command. The research data from Kelvan Prime has been confirmed and verified. Production of the viral agent is beginning immediately. Projected deployment to frontline forces within 72 hours. Early models suggest we can reduce Vrax threat capability by 60 to 70% within 2 months of widespread implementation. He paused, seemed to struggle with his next words. Corporal Marcus Webb, human, volunteered for an assignment everyone knew was suicide. He was expected to buy perhaps 6 hours. He held for 14. He eliminated an estimated 4,200 Vrax units through direct action, creating conditions that allowed 3 scientists to complete research that will save billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. Another pause. He will be awarded the Coalition Star of Valor posthumously, the highest honor we can bestow. But more than that, he showed us something we'd forgotten. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's not superior firepower or advanced technology. It's simply the decision to stand when standing is required, regardless of cost. The screen went dark. I left the Command Intelligence Center in a daze, wandered through corridors without seeing them. My mind kept replaying those final moments. Marcus standing alone, knowing exactly what was coming, choosing to stay anyway. 3 days later, the Coalition News Service ran the full story. Marcus Webb became famous, his name spoken across 1,000 worlds. Humans, previously dismissed as unremarkable newcomers, suddenly commanded respect. Requests for human military advisors flooded Coalition Command. Recruitment centers reported that humans were volunteering for frontline positions in unprecedented numbers. 1 month after Kelvan Prime, I received an unexpected message. Personal encryption, routed through multiple secure channels. When I opened it, I found a video file. The timestamp showed it was recorded 6 hours before the facility's destruction. Marcus sat in the laboratory, armor half removed, cleaning a minor wound on his arm. It looked exhausted but alert, eyes clear despite everything. If you're watching this, things went according to plan, which is to say, badly, but successfully. That slight smile again. I'm recording this because Dr. Yana mentioned you came to watch the transport launch. The Quellian support specialist. Telek, right? I felt my heart skip. I wanted to thank you. For caring enough to show up. For treating me like the decision mattered instead of just being stupid. Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most, especially when you're about to do something monumentally dumb. He adjusted his position, winced slightly. I also wanted to tell you something about humans. We're not special. We're not superior. We're just stubborn. We've faced extinction 12 times on our own planet before we ever left it. Ice ages, plagues, wars that almost ended everything. We learned that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about refusing to quit when quitting makes sense. Outside the recording, I could hear distant weapons fire, the sounds of battle preparing to resume. The galaxy is big and scary, and full of things that want to kill us all. But here's what I know. Somebody has to stand up. Somebody has to fight. Not because victory is guaranteed, but because the alternative is unacceptable. Today, that somebody is me. Tomorrow, it might be you, or that Draxon trooper who backed away, or anyone else who decides that enough is enough. He stood, started reassembling his armor. Take care of yourself, Telek. And if you ever face something that scares you, remember this. Courage is contagious. One person standing up gives others permission to do the same. That's how you change the galaxy. One stubborn decision at a time. The recording ended. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen. Then I did something I'd never considered before. I walked to the recruitment office and requested transfer to active combat duty. The officer, processing my application, a Thrim administrator with perpetually bored eyes, looked up in surprise. Support specialists don't typically request frontline assignments. Are you certain? I thought about Marcus Webb standing in darkness, fighting impossible odds, buying time for people he'd never met to complete work that would save billions he'd never see. Yes, I'm certain. Somebody has to stand up. The officer processed my paperwork without further comment. 6 months later, I found myself on the front lines of the Vrax conflict, using the viral weapon that Marcus had died to create. The swarm that once seemed unstoppable was breaking apart, their coordination failing, their numbers dwindling. We were winning. And every time I stood my ground when instinct screamed to run, every time I chose to fight when surrender seemed logical, I thought about a human who raised his hand in a room full of silence. Courage is contagious. He was right about that.